And we are continuing on. This is still Company B. And we're almost back up to the Company H position. And we have one more prominent area to show you. One thing about the battle, it's been they've been fighting it for basically 2 days. And on the days of the battle, the temperature peaked over 100 degrees. And you have men wearing period uniforms made of wool, long sleeves, things like that. So it was quite hot. And the men really didn't have any water. They ran out of water quickly. And they were up on this defensive position with the sun beating down on them. There's no trees here, just like in most ridges in eastern Montana. No trees up here because there's very little water. So the soldiers were really hurting for water, the ones that were in fine shape. More of a problem were the wounded. By the time you got to the 26th, this position here you basically had 18 men killed, and I believe there was another 50 wounded at this point. None of them had water either. Well, obviously the dead don't matter, but the wounded had no water, and they were really crying out for water. Dr. Porter finally went to Reno and told him, if we don't get water here soon, a lot of these wounded are going to die. So Captain Benteen heard this, and he called for reinforcements over to this position. We are in the Company H position, by the way. As you can see, there's Company H, where the Metter marker is, and Julian Jones marker. Captain Benteen decided that they needed to go down and get water. And here you have this small little coulee. It's actually called Water Carrier's Ravine. And you can see where it leads. It leads to the Little Bighorn River. What he wanted volunteers to go down Water Carrier Ravine in the daylight and get water, bring it back for not only the wounded, but the whole command. 4 members from Company H, including Charles Windolph, actually went to the high bluffs on both sides of Water Carrier Ravine and acted as sharpshooters and actually fired down in that area. And there were Indians down that area, so they kind of pulled back the water carriers. I believe there were 26 of them from, I believe, 6 of the 7 companies. They went down the ravine, they got the water. Amidst all the firing that was going on, only one man was wounded. That was Private Michael Madden of Company K. Everybody else made it back up here and they got the water. They dragged Madden back up here as well. They took him to the field hospital, and unfortunately he was hit in the leg, and Porter could do nothing with it, so he had to amputate the leg. But he didn't have any anesthesia. So what Porter did was he gave Madden a nice stiff drink of whiskey before he cut the leg off. And so Madden did get the whiskey, and they cut the leg off. And it's said that after the amputation was done, Michael Madden sort of looked at Henry Porter and said, "Cut off my other leg," meaning he wanted another sip of that whiskey. Must have been good. During the Water Carrier Ravine incident, well, after the battle, every member that was involved in the incident was awarded the Medal of Honor, except for one person. The one individual that did not win a Medal of Honor is Private Michael Madden, the only man injured, wounded, lost his leg. And I think it's kind of rough. If anybody deserved one, it sure was him. And we'll continue on. Another Medal of Honor winner occurred to the east, and we'll flip around. One of my favorite individuals of the battle, just for his heroism alone. During the 26th, the pack mules, remember, are in the swale around the hospital. Gunfire spooked one of the pack mules, and it actually stampeded out of the perimeter and ran down toward the Indians. Well, Company C Sergeant, who was detached to the pack train earlier in the day, Sergeant Richard Hanley, he actually mounted without orders. His horse and went after the pack mule to get it because it was laden with ammunition and supplies, and they didn't want it to fall into the hands of the Indians. So both the pack mule and Michael and Richard Hanley disappeared over the ridges here. They heard a lot of gunfire. They figured it was all over. Well, a couple minutes later, Hanley reappeared, and he had the pack mule, and he brought it back amidst the fire. He wasn't wounded, wasn't hit at all, and he got the pack mule back here, put it back in the perimeter, and for that act, he won the Medal of Honor. Now we're going to look to the west again, into the Little Bighorn Valley. By the time we get to the end of the 26th, the Indians pretty much break off the attack. They head back down into the valley to the village, which is pretty much behind the bluffs here. You could probably see the southern part of it. It would have been right in the trees here, or right behind the trees. Most of the village is to the north, though, behind these. You can't see the bluffs here. But the Indians packed up their camp and they started moving south down the Little Bighorn, going toward the mountains in the distance. Those are the Bighorn Mountains. And they followed it all the way down, and they burned the fields as they went, and they started to break off into their smaller bands and disappear into the terrain, basically. The soldiers weren't really sure why the Indians were leaving. The next day, on the 27th, a dust cloud was seen coming from the north, and it came down. The soldiers were fearing it might be more Indians, and after a little while they realized that it was Terry and Gibbon. They had been coming down the Bighorn, and they finally came down the Little Bighorn. They found the Custer dead first, and then moved down further south into the abandoned Indian village, and that's when they saw the survivors up here. So it was basically a bad ending to the campaign for the soldiers. Obviously the people up here stated they had no clue that Custer had been killed. It had been a couple of days, they hadn't seen Custer. They thought that he might have been driven off to the north by superior numbers of Indians. But both Terry and Gibbon told the survivors here that Custer and everybody that went with him was killed. They counted all the bodies on the field, so it was a real shock to the soldiers. So at this point, they pretty much packed up here and would move to the north and end up burying the Custer dead before continuing north to the far west to take care of the wounded, put the wounded on the steamship and get them back to hospitals. And of course the campaign would end for a little while here. The cavalry would have to lick their wounds. Alright, so that's pretty much the entire battle here. The first 2 days of the fight, or the only 2 days of the fight, on Reno Hill. I've walked the entire perimeter and showed you basically everything I can. And so we will stop here with our look to the north at Sharpshooter Ridge. And you can see Weir Point, the flat top on the right, and then the camel humpbacks on the left. That's Weir Point. We will stop here and we will continue on, go to the next segment.